Hello, welcome back to Cracking the Cryptic, where not only it seems that am I wearing a shirt that isn't conducive to the webcam, so sorry about that, but we're going to take a look today at a sandwich Sudoku, not one of ours I should say. This is a puzzle that has been sent to me all the way from Japan. So there are a group of Japanese teenagers who create puzzles, and one of the puzzles they created this month is a sandwich Sudoku. So I thought this would be a good opportunity for me to go through a puzzle with you. There is a real dearth of sandwich Sudokus on the internet actually, so if you have tried to search for them, you won't find many, and for that reason I thought this would be a good opportunity. In terms of our game, which came out earlier this week, a couple of admin points on that. We've released a new build on App Store and on Steam in the last day or so, just to deal with some of the feedback you've sent us. So on Steam it should now support the number pad, which you were hoping for, and on the App Store version we've got the option to make your notes bigger, we've got an option to reset all the user settings, and we fixed an issue that some of you were having. If you suspended the game, it wasn't saving your progress, so that's now all fixed. And in terms of the Android version, I'm hopeful it'll be out on Friday, but don't hold me to it, and I will of course let you know. So yeah, this is the or the puzzle set that got sent from Japan. So you can see here we've got the sandwich we're going to have a look at today. If you want to try the puzzle yourself, then click on the link under the video. And yeah, I'm going to go through it quite slowly because anyone who's new to the channel doesn't know what sandwich Sudokus are or why to be interested in them. I'm going to hopefully go through that with you. I suspect, given the number of given digits in this sandwich Sudoku, that this is not going to be too difficult. So it's quite a good one to start with. If this is your first sandwich Sudoku, this is probably a nice one for that. Okay, so here's the puzzle. Now, the first thing to note is my tips for solving sandwich Sudoku. High-level tips. Always start with trying to place all the ones and the nines. So a reminder, if you don't know the rules of sandwich Sudoku, what are these clues outside the grid telling you? Well, what they're telling you is that in each row and column, if we look at this 12 for example, the sum of the cells sandwiched between the 1 and the 9 in this column must add up to 12. Now we've already got a 1 there, so we're going to have to leave at least 2 cells between the 1 and the 9 in order to put, for example, if there was a 5 here, 5 plus 7 equals 12, there could be a 9 here. And it's logic like that we need to continually apply to try and build up the pattern of the 1s and the 9s. So in doing that, my biggest tip and the most important tip in a sandwich Sudoku is to label the cells that cannot be 1s and 9s. So obviously all of these cells, which have given digits that are not 1s and 9s, can't be 1s and 9s. And we need to keep rigorously applying that, because locating the positions that can't be 1s and 9s is bizarrely helpful in locating where the 1s and 9s can go. So in fact, if we look at the 12 here, this cell couldn't possibly be a 1 or a 9, this couldn't be a 1 or a 9, and this couldn't be 1 or a 9. So that allows us, you see, to start limiting the places that 1s and 9s can be in the central box. Let's have a look at this 3 total to take that a stage further. Now, how can we make 3 as the correct total, given that we have a 1 and a 9 surrounding cells summing to 3? Well, clearly the 3 is going to have to just be on its own, because if I show you in this column, I couldn't have a situation where we had a 9 here and then a 1 here, because that would imply these 2 cells had to sum up to 3. Well, the only way of making 2 cells sum up to 3 in a Sudoku would be if I repeat the 1 in the column. That's not possible. So a 3 on its own, we can say with certainty, must have this sort of pattern. So what does that tell us about this this box? Well, it tells us this square can't be a 1 or a 9 because I couldn't put a 3 next to it. This cell could be, but we can do the same thing on this central column. Look, we've got a 3 in this column as well. So again, I know the 3 sits between the 1 and the 9 in this column. And look, we've actually got the 3 placed. So these two squares must be the 1 and the 9 in column 5, and all of the rest of the cells, therefore, in column 5 are green. Now look, I've not had to do anything clever regarding the arithmetic now, but I know this square must be a 9 because it's the only square left that isn't green in this block. Once I've got the 9 here, we know that it's next to a 3, so that must now be 3 and 1. Let's highlight those squares as green now. Similarly, we have a 4 in this this row of the grid. Well, that's going to have to be this 4 here. So I'm going to be able to place the 9, and as a result of that, place lots more squares in green. Now this 12 sum becomes useful because I've managed to place the 1 and the 9 now in column 6. So this square, because of this 7 here, it's going to have to be a 5. Now let's have a look at this 18 sum in row 4 and think about how that might work. Is it possible that this is a 1? If this is a 1, the implication is these two squares would have to sum up to 18, which is clearly not possible. So actually both of these squares must be green, and the 18 is going to have to be with a 1 in one of these squares here. Well, it can't be here because that's going to make the total 12 and we need it to be 18. So the 1 is in one of those two squares. So I'd highlight that in this way. And now we can use the 30, well, we could have used them before, but let's have a look at the 35 totals in row 1 and column 9 and think about what they mean. That means we have to put cells summing to 35 between the 1 and the 9. Now, an important thing to note about sandwich Sudoku, and indeed about killer Sudoku, is if I add up any complete column or row in a Sudoku puzzle, the sum of all those numbers will be 45. That's because if I add up the numbers 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5 plus 6 plus 7 plus 8 plus 9, that's what I get. I get 45. So given that this 35 is telling us the sum of the cells between the 1 and the 9, it's telling us that actually I must put the 1s and the 9s at the edges, the very edges of this row, of this column, in order that the remaining cells, which are going to be 45 minus 1 minus 9, could sum to 35. And indeed, if you add up 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5 plus 6 plus 7 plus 8, you of course get 35. So I can do the same thing here. This square is going to have to be the one with the 9 in this row. Make lots of squares green as a result of this. And look, now this square, which could have been a 1, absent the logic in column 9, now can't be. It's not possible for this square to be a 1. Ooh. So let's get rid of that. This square must be a 1. And now look here, we've got 12 total in column 8. Well, so clearly this isn't a 1, this isn't a 1 or a 9. Now, can this be a 1 or a 9? This square here? And the answer is no, because if I make this a 9, these two squares would have to sum up to 12, and that would put a repeated 9 in the column. So actually, I know at least these 3 cells are going to be adding up to 9 here. And the 9 is going to be in one of those two positions. And I'm sure you've all noticed now that you can resolve that as well, because actually if we look at row 9 of the grid, we already have 2 cells in there pencil marked with 1s and 9s. So if I'd applied the green along there, this square is the only position now in column 8 that can contain a 1 or a 9 that isn't marked. And that allows us to unwind all around the grid like this, and these 2 squares as well. What's the best way of making progress from here? Let's have a look at this 0. You can see that 0 total means there can be no gap at all between the 1 and the 9 in this row. We've already the 1 placed. This square cannot be the 9 because of the 9 down here, so that's going to be a 9. That means this square is green, and this square must be 1. It's the only position in this box that can be a 1 or a 9. There's a few ways we can make progress here. I'm just going to try and spot the best way to... Yeah, let's have a look at this 0 in row 6. So we know the 1 and the 9 are next to each other. Now if that's the case, we know this square must be a 1 or a 9, because it's not possible for the 1 and the 9 to occupy those two positions, and we've obviously got everything else in this row is green already. So this square is a 1 or a 9. Once I get this square, I can look at the column total, which is 8. So let's ask ourselves, is it possible then that this square is a 9? And it's not, because if I do put a 9 here, I can make this a 1. But in order to make these two squares add up to 8, I'd have to put another 1 here, which is obviously incorrect. So this square is green. I need to leave enough room to make cells adding to 8 between the 1 and the 9. Well, this is the only square that is a candidate for that. So in fact, this square must be an 8. And this is the 1 or the 9. And this 9 tells us, in fact, it is a 1. So we get to do that. Now let's have a look at this column. This is interesting. Look, we've got the 0 total here. So we know, well, in fact, we can, by simple Sudoku, we know it's a 1 here. But we could have resolved it anyway using the 27, because 27, if I tried to put a 1 or a 9 in here, that would have implied that the cells outside the sandwich would have had to sum up to 45 minus 1 minus 9 minus 27. That would be 8. So these three cells would have had to add to 8 without using a 1. Well, that's not possible. So there were a couple of ways, probably about 10 ways actually, that we could have worked out this square here was not the 1 or the 9. Well, this square is the 1, this square is not a 1 or a 9, and we must have nearly done the 1s and the 9s now. Yes, we have. So let's look at the 14 here. So we have the 1 in the column, so it's not possible for the 9 to be down here because that wouldn't leave enough room to make cells summing to 14. This square must be a 9, and this square must be a 9 by simple Sudoku. So now we've done the first stage of the puzzle, and as I say, this puzzle is quite gentle. If you are looking for more difficult sandwich Sudokus, you tend to find that they'd have far fewer given digits and far fewer obvious row and column totals. So obviously these 35s and these 0s are so powerful in terms of resolving the pattern of the 1s and the 9s in the grid. That wouldn't tend to happen on the more difficult puzzles. So now what we can do though is we can go through all of these rows and columns and pick off all of the easy digits that the arithmetic gives us. So we've got the 4 here. This 15 means this square must be a 5, because we've got 3 plus 7 plus 5 gives us 15. Put the 5's pencil marked in down here. 18, well, yeah, we're going to get that as well. We've got 7, 5, this square therefore is a 6 in order to make the sum work. 0 and 0, well, they're not going to tell us anything more. The 15 here, that means this square must be a 5. And again, I get to pencil mark some 5's in there and there as a result of that, because of this 5 up here and this 5 interacting on this block. The 24 is interesting. Yeah, the 24 is interesting. And this is interesting not for the contents of the sandwich, which would be these 5 cells here, but the sort of crusts of the sandwich, or maybe the outside bit, whatever. I suppose the 1 and the 9 are the crusts. So let's think about the arithmetic of this row. We've got 45 as the total for the row. We know that. Let's deduct the 1 and the 9. That gives us 35. Let's deduct 24 from that. That means this square and this square must add up to 11. So, is there anything we can say about that? Well, it obviously couldn't be 3 and 8, and it can't be 2 and 9. So this is either 4 and 7, or it's 5 and 6. Let me just have a, so it's either 4, 7, or it's 5, 6. It can't be, the square can't be a 5. So the options for this square are 4, 6, and 7, but we can now combine the logic of row 8 with the logic of column 1. Because in column 1, we can do another sort of trick on the outside cells. We've got 27 here. So 27 plus 1 plus 9 is 37. So these two squares, to make up the total of 45, have got to add up to 8. Well, if I put a 4 in here, that's going to mean there's another 4, so it's not 4. And if I put a 7 in here, that means this square has to be a 1. Well, that's not going to work either. So in fact, this square is a 6, and that means this square at the very bottom must be a 2. And we have a 2 here and a 2 here. So looking along here, this square must be a 2. We know these two squares add up to 11, so this square is a 5. Therefore, this square must be a 5 by simple Sudoku. And there's a 5 up at the top here. Now, what could we do next? Well, we could use the 18 total here. Let's have a think about those 3 cells. Now, if we look at these 3 cells, you can see we have a 5 here and a 5 here. So there is no 5 in these 3 cells. So we know there must be an 8. In fact, we know it from this 8 as well anyway, but because this couldn't be 5, 6 and 7, because there's no 5 possible, we actually know there must be an 8 for that reason. This 8, in turn, by simple Sudoku, actually told us the same thing. This 3 means there's a 3 in one of those two squares. So, along with the 8 here, we need a total of 10 more. But it can't be 1, 9, it can't be 2, 8, and because there's a 3 in one of these two squares, it can't be 3, 7 either. So actually, these 3 squares here must be 4, 6 and 8. Which means that these 3 squares here must be 3, 5 and 7. And this square is a 5, so this must be a 5. This is 3 and 7. And there's a 7 here, look, so that resolves itself. 7, 3, that must be a 4. Okay, and we haven't done, I don't think I've checked the columns yet either, so let's quickly check the columns. Yeah, we get to place a 6 there. We need 14 between the 1 and the 9, that means that's a 6. 3 we did, I think. This 3 we did the 12. 12 here, look, and we've got 3 and a 5 already, so this square is a 4, which means neither of those squares is a 4, and this square must be a 4. This 6 resolves which way round the 6 and the 8 go. These two squares here must be 3 and 7, and that's resolved as well by this 7 at the top. I want to put a 2 there. I want to put a 6, I think. Yeah, 6 looks right. And we must need a 7 and an 8 into these two squares, and again we're able to resolve that. This must be an 8 by normal Sudoku. 8, 8, 8 up here. These two squares must be 2 and 6. Oops, 6 and 2 like that. So I think we've now used all the row and the column totals. So once you reach this point, you know you're just on to normal Sudoku rules. So we should be able to do the rest of it without recourse to anything arithmetical. So this should be a 2, I think. If we look along this row now, what do we need? We haven't put an 8 in and we haven't put a 5 in. And this 5 down here means that this is going to have to be this way around. I've got a 2 and a 4 into these two squares. 2 down here resolves the order again. These two squares should be 3 and 2, so 2 and 3 like that. That makes this a 2, and this a 2. These two squares should be 7 and 8. Yeah, and we're finishing off now. It's I think, providing I don't make an error, we're going to be there in a moment. So 3, 3. This must be a 3. 4 and 6 to finish this off, so that's going to be that way round. That makes this a 6 and this a 5. That resolves the 5 position over here. 4 and 7 into these two squares. 7, 4 like that. That should be a 4. Have I finished all the grid? I think so. Let's check. And that's how to do Sandwich Sudoku. As I say, gentle puzzle, but really good primer for those of you new to the genre. We'll be back tomorrow with another edition of Cracking the Cryptic. I think we have a very interesting puzzle by the looks of it, very colourful puzzle from Laura Solar. A skyscraper killer, I think it's called, so look out for that. Thanks for watching. Back soon.